The Bering Strait. This is related to so much of what we talk about on these streams. This is a bridge that would connect Russia to Alaska. It would be a bridge across the Bering Strait, the Pacific Ocean, connecting Eurasia to America, North America to Asia specifically. It would be connecting the Russian Far East to the United States state of Alaska. And there's been talk of this bridge being built for many, many years. And I am all about building this bridge. The first people I ever heard talking about this bridge were people in the LaRouche movement, the Schiller Institute, and they talked about it as part of the World Land Bridge. And they had their understanding of it, but the concept of the Bering Strait Bridge goes back very, very far. And I will be getting into that later. But I feel like there's a bigger conversation to be had about this bridge and why it's important. There's a bigger conversation about what we're doing and why we're doing it and why we exist as the Center for Political Innovation and why we frame things and phrase things in a certain way. There's such a big conversation to be had about this bridge. Because I think that after Donald Trump wins the upcoming election, it's going to be really important to be out there with pictures of him shaking hands with Kim Il-sung and say that that's a mandate and we want peace with North Korea, CPI. We've been at that from the beginning. We even published this book, right? Journey of Hope, Building a Movement for Peaceful Reunification of the Korean Peninsula. We have a picture of Trump and Kim. We were out in front of the White House rallying for it. It's going to be even more important to be out there with that. But we should also be out there talking about the Bering Strait Bridge. And I will tell you why. I think that this bridge is the key to a whole new world. And I want you to understand why. And it's related to so many things that are going on, so many of the changes that our organization has gone over and undergone in the last couple of months, so many of the events in the world today. There's just so much there about this bridge and why we should be urging Donald Trump to build it as fast as possible. So let me explain. Folks, there's a book that I'm sure many of us, if not all of us, have probably read. It's The Little Red Book by Mao Zedong. Mao Zedong was the leader of the Chinese Revolution. And it started out, the Little Red Book was originally blue. It was blue. It wasn't called the Little Red Book. It was just a blue book of quotations from Chairman Mao. And it was issued to Chinese soldiers during the early 1960s. I'll go get mine. This Little Red Book was issued to Chinese soldiers as part of their military equipment during the early 60s. Right? During the 1960s, the Chinese military was led by Lin Biao, who had been a founder of the Chinese Communist revolutionary movement, a general in the People's Liberation Army. And he wanted to ensure political education for the soldiers in the Chinese military. So he made a book that was originally blue, and it was called Quotations from Chairman Mao. And it was just selected quotes from Mao, the leader of the Chinese Revolution. And the book was a big hit. And as they launched the Cultural Revolution in China, and as they tried to purge the Chinese Communist Party of people they considered to be sellouts and traitors, people taking the capitalist road, people waving the red flag to oppose the red flag, they published it. They made it red to be communist. And they published it. It had Chairman Mao's picture in the front with tissue paper over it because it's like an important leader, and Chairman Mao's picture in the front. And it's short, easily memorizable quotations from Chairman Mao Zedong. And this was the holy book, so to speak, of the Cultural Revolution in China, of the Mao era in China. And the Black Panthers used to wave this book around, and it was considered, and I mean, still to some degree is a very, very important communist text, one of the most widely studied texts in the history of the world. And there's a lot in it, right? It's a lot of different concepts packed in there. And there's a lot of different quotations in the Little Red Book. And it's designed to be memorizable, to be short and concise, because there were many people in China who were not literate, right? The Chinese Revolution was struggling to overcome illiteracy. So it was designed to be memorizable. It was Mao's Twitter page, right? It was his tweets. It was his short, concise thoughts explaining important concepts that were key to building his political movement. Well, there's a couple themes that come up in the Little Red Book, and I'm just going to show you a couple quotations from Mao's Little Red Book. Here's one. U.S. imperialism invaded China's territory of Taiwan and has occupied it for the past 9 years. A short while ago, it sent its armed forces to invade and occupy Lebanon. The United States has set up hundreds of military bases in many countries all over the world. China's territory of Taiwan, Lebanon, all the military bases of the United States on foreign soil are so many nooses around the neck of U.S. imperialism. The nooses have been fashioned by the Americans themselves and by nobody else. And it is they themselves who have put the nooses around their own necks, handing the ends of the ropes to the Chinese people, the Arab peoples, the peoples of the world who love peace and oppose aggression. The longer the U.S. aggressors remain in those places, the tighter the nooses around their neck will become. Now, this is from the Little Red Book. That's a quotation from Mao Zedong in 1958. Now, I've looked at this quote. I've read this quote many times. And usually when I read this quote, I thought he was just saying that it's evil what the United States is doing to the world, right? He's condemning U.S. military interventions around the world. And he's saying that that it's wrong, and we're gonna punish the United States. The people of the world are gonna rise up and punish the United States for having these bases. That's not what he's saying. Read the words very carefully. He says, the nooses have been fashioned by the Americans themselves, by nobody else. They have put the nooses around their own necks. What is he saying? He's saying that by stretching its tentacles all over the world, by setting up this international military force, this international military presence, by spreading itself all across the planet, the United States is weakening itself and making itself more vulnerable. And that the U.S. imperialist system, the Western imperialist system that dominates the world and keeps the world poor, is going to tear itself apart, trying to keep control of the whole world. And it's going to come apart. It's not sustainable. He's saying that by, he's talking about how the USA has troops in Lebanon. The U.S. has troops at that point in Taiwan. The USA has troops in the Arab country. And that the vision of the United States having hundreds of overseas military bases, having its corporations in every corner of the world, that is not going to be a sustainable model for maintaining a country. You can't run an empire and dominate the world for big corporations and have a stable, peaceful, comfortable, happy society at home. It doesn't work that way. You just can't do it. Very interesting. Now, there's another quote from Mao Zedong in the Little Red Book. Oh, not that one. Pull up another one. Another quotation from Chairman Mao. Oh, that's the one I just showed. All right, not that one. Pull it up. Another quotation from Chairman Mao. He says, "It is my opinion that the international situation has now reached a new turning point. There are two winds in the world today, the east wind and the west wind. There's a Chinese saying, either the east wind prevails over the west wind, or the west wind prevails over the east wind. I believe it is characteristic of the situation today that the east wind is prevailing over the west wind. That is to say, the forces of socialism have become overwhelmingly superior to the forces of imperialism. Now, what are you saying here? Either the east wind prevails over the west wind, or the west wind prevails over the east wind. That kind of thinking is something I think we need to get beyond. And this is what I've been trying to get people to understand. So if you're in the United States and you realize that the United States sits at the center of a global empire, big corporations in the United States, big banks, big oil companies, big tech monopolies dominate the world. These corporations are actively working to prevent countries around the world from industrializing and building themselves up. They are keeping the world poor. If you realize that the people of Nigeria have lots and lots of oil, but yet they are very, very poor, and their life expectancy and living conditions are very, very poor because the profits from their oil are going to Wall Street banks and not to the people of Nigeria. If you can understand that the people of Mexico have been growing their own food for thousands of years, since before Christopher Columbus ever came, but now they import the majority of their food, or they have to buy it from American agribusiness corporations. If you can understand that American corporations like Monsanto, like BP, Shell, and Chevron, like ExxonMobil, and like Bank of America, like Chase Bank, if you can understand that U.S. imperialism, that in the form of imperialism, the highest stage of capitalism, the rule of the world by trusts, cartels, and syndicates, huge monopolies that are dominating the world, that are trying to keep the world poor, that after the fall of the Soviet Union, they went into Russia and just economically looted the place and devastated the place. And Putin has been able to fix things up by putting oil and gas under public ownership and restarting the economy by taking control of the natural resources and restabilizing the economy. If you look at what the United States did in South and Central America in the 1990s, how Bolivia sold off every government asset, was sold off, the oil industry, the mining resources, the natural gas was all just sold off to the highest bidder, and the country was economically demolished. And only, in the 21st century did they start moving away from that. You can look at the austerity, the crippling austerity that's been imposed on countries, and how country after country in Africa and Asia and South America and Central America and so much of the world has just been kept in chronic poverty. Eastern Europe just kept in chronic poverty by the United States so that big corporations can dominate the world. And that this system of imperialism, capitalism in its monopolistic stage, is unsustainable. And that the people of the world are fighting against that system. And China broke free from that system, now as the second largest economy in the world. And that Russia was free from that system and industrialized, defeated the Nazis, invented space travel. But then that system reconquered it in the 1990s, devastated the place. But then Putin reasserted public control over oil and gas and restructured things and improved things in Russia. You can understand that Iran, was at one point under a brutal U.S.-backed military dictator, the Shah, but then they broke out of that system, and that's why they've been able to build their country up. That's why they have influence all over the Middle East. That's why people throughout the Middle East who oppose Israel rally around Iran, seeing Iran as a center of imperialism. If you can understand that, right, that there's a big chunk of the world now that is moving out of imperialism, centered around Russia and China, but also countries like India that are not necessarily socialist, but are happy to trade with Russia and China if they can get a better deal. You can understand that the BRICS, Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa, the axis of resistance in the Middle East, the Bolivarian alternative of Latin America, the Shanghai Cooperation Organization based in China, the Eurasian Economic Union of Russia. If you can understand that this new economy is the future, and that the imperialist system of Wall Street and ExxonMobil and BP, Shell, and Chevron, that imperialist system where a few countries in the West get wealthy, a few big cities like Wall Street and London enrich themselves, Wall Street, London, and Los Angeles enrich themselves while the rest of the planet gets poorer and poorer and poorer. And you can understand that that system is on its way out, and that a new system is emerging in the world today. And the center of that new system is countries that really emerged because of socialist revolutions, right? The Soviet Union became an industrial superpower because they had a communist revolution. China became what it is today because they had a communist revolution. Iran didn't have a Marxist revolution. It had an Islamic revolution, but they broke out of that system. They put their economy under public ownership. Right, Latin America, many countries have broken out because of that, and we saw the rise of the Ba'ath in the Middle East. We saw the rise of African independence movements, Gaddafi in Libya, the Zimbabwe, Robert Mugabe. There's just been many anti-colonial movements around the world, and it's because of those anti-colonial movements that countries have broken out of this Western system and begun to industrialize and develop. And you look at that, and you can see that the Western imperialist system, rooted in colonialism and the slave trade and the slaughter of the indigenous people, all the way up to the ugly outbreak of World War I and World War II and the CIA coups and the sweatshops and the austerity and all of that stuff. You can see that that system is the past, and that the future is in the East. Right? We can see that Mao was a little bit ahead of the game. Right? He said in 1958, I believe, is when this particular quotation was from. Mao was a bit ahead of himself, right? When he said the forces of socialism have become overwhelmingly superior. Well, the Soviet Union did fall in the 90s, and it wasn't a straight line, but, he's saying that the east wind is prevailing over the west wind. And so this presents a problem. What do you do if you live in the United States of America and you realize the way the world is moving? You realize that they are paving roads all over China and they are unpaving roads all over America. Did you know that they are unpaving roads all over America? They are, right? In the United States, there are a number of municipalities, townships that cannot afford to maintain paved roads. And so they have a machine you can buy. It's called a reclaimer. And it rips up the asphalt and pulverizes it and replaces paved roads with dirt roads. And in Alabama and in Vermont and in Tennessee and in many parts of this country, they are unpaving the roads in America. They're unpaving roads in America while they're going to the most remote mountains in Tibet, in China, and building and paving new roads. This is what's happening. The Western imperialist system, capitalism in its monopolistic stage, the system that those U.S. military bases have spread all over the world to defend, that system is coming apart. And it's coming apart for a variety of different reasons. The main reason, I would argue, is based in technology. It's based in the fact that in this system, in the system of production organized for profit, human labor creates the value. It is how value is created. And as you reduce the role of human labor in technology, human beings can only sell their labor power if a capitalist can make profits from it. There's less room for people at the assembly line. And this age-old problem of more efficient production and greater advance in technology leading to economic turbulence and instability, this built-in problem of the capitalist system, of poverty created by abundance, poverty amid plenty. This problem hangs over the Western system and it cannot overcome it. And that the computer revolution and the rise of artificial intelligence and the ability of machines to replace human labor power and human labor power being replaced by machines, and the ability of machines to churn out products like crazy, but the inability of human beings to go sell themselves and have enough money to buy the products that are being created. This problem, we stand outcast and starving mid the wonders we have made. This problem of what they call the tendency of the falling rate of profit, the problem of value crisis, overproduction, these problems, this problem has not gone away. And it's still there. When we talk about the coal miner's riddle, where the father is with his son, and the son says, "Father, why is it so cold?" And the son says, and the father says to the son, "Because I can't afford any coal to heat the stove." And he says, "Father, why can't we afford any coal to heat the stove?" He says, "Because I lost my job at the coal mine. I've been laid off." The little boy says to his father, "Why did you lose your job at the coal mine?" And he says, "Because there is too much coal." That is the problem of capitalism, the problem of poverty created by abundance. And that problem persists. And in a rationally organized economy, you can deal with that. But in an economy where profits are in command and the irrationality of the market is everywhere, you can't deal with that problem. And human labor power being reduced results in abundance, creating poverty, people being homeless because there are too many houses. And this is the reason that the Western system is coming apart. And there's a social component, the radical individualism, the lack of any group identity, the belief that it's individualism above all else, the belief that there is no truth, the philosophical irrationalism, that right and wrong don't exist, that truth itself does not exist, philosophical irrationalism, a belief that the universe is centered around chaos rather than around order. All of this is leading to the West just deteriorating. And as the West deteriorates, the East is rising. And the East continues to rise. And in the East, they have traditions like filial piety. They have economic systems like socialism with Chinese characteristics. They have community obligation. They have state central planning of the economy, and families are staying together, and economies are more rationally organized, and peoples feel loyalty to each other, and people feel more loyalty to their community, and people feel more loyalty to their country and their family, and societies are moving ahead, whereas in the West, we're coming apart. But that's not what I came on here to talk about. I've talked about that many times on these streams, and I'm not the only person who sees this, right? And if I were to say that the Western system is in decline and that the Eastern system is rising, I would not be alone. There's many people who believe that. There's many people all over social media, all over the internet who believe that. There's many people in the world who understand that. The African continent is drifting closer to China and Russia. Everybody understands this. Everybody understands this. But the question is, what do you do about it? What do you do about it? If you are living in the center of the global imperialist system, if you're living in the center of US imperialism, how do you view this? There are generally only considered to be two options. The first option is to oppose it and to say, I live in the West, I am an American, and so I want to see the West continue to dominate the world. And that's what the Proud Boys, you remember the Proud Boys that were supporters of Donald Trump, this organization, a lot of them went to jail for the January 6th. They used to chant, West is the best, West is the best. You get a lot of people that are in the Trump camp, and that they see the West in decline, and they bemoan that, and they hate communism, and they see the liberals and their ineffective policies as an expression of communism. They think Kamala Harris is a communist. They think that Black Lives Matter are communists, and they see communists as tearing down the West, and communists as pointing to the West's flaws, and they hate communists, and they think the West is the best, and that's their attitude. And liberals think the same thing, but with a different emphasis. Liberals don't chant West is the best, but they believe that the United States is spreading human rights all over the world. And that in the West, we let gay people be gay, and we let transgender people be trans, and we believe in feminism, and we believe in human rights and all of this, and that whoever the West is targeting is a homophobe or a sexist or a dictator, and that the West is spreading human rights, and they use social media to foment unrest, and George Soros funds nonprofits to go out and protest and burn buildings and overthrow governments. And they overthrew the Ukrainian government in 2014 and installed a government full of Nazis. But liberals are out there supporting it because they hate Russia, because Putin must have been homophobic, they said, and so therefore blah blah blah, right? And that they hate Iran because Iran is oppressing women, and so they're demonizing Iran. And that liberals emphasize the West as the purveyor of liberal values, the purveyor of human rights. And so they think the Western system must defeat the East in the name of human rights. And the conservatives, they think that that the Western system must defeat the East because they're racist, because we're just better and the other people are inferior, and blah blah blah. And that that you get the left and the right both say that the West must somehow hold on to power and defeat the East. That's one option, right, that you have in the United States. You can be a Trumper, you can be a Kamala Harris liberal, you can be a woke liberal, you can be a new rightist, and you can maintain that we must defeat the East, right? We must defeat the East. That's one way you can approach this. And the other way you can approach this is to be a doomer. And that's considered to be the other option. You can be somebody who says the Western societies are racist and colonialist and based on, rooted in slavery and colonialism, and the West is going nowhere, and America is ending, and I burn the American flag, and I hate it, and the global South is going to rise and the West is dying, and I celebrate that because America is evil and racist, and you can sit there and condemn the society around you and say, I hate it, and I hope it crashes and burns, and and you can get into this pessimistic, angry place, and you can say, I'm the good American because I realize the evil things my government does, but all the people around me are a bunch of sheeple, and I hope they get what they deserve. I'm a good person. I'm Sophie Scholl in Nazi Germany, and my neighbors are all Holocaust collaborators, and I'm the good American, and and that's Danny Haiphong, and that's Ben Norton, and that's the Party of Socialism and Liberation. They hate the American people, and they see the East as rising, and they see America as falling, and they celebrate that fall, and they want to see it fall, and they want the country to fall apart, and they're happy the roads are being unpaved, and they want everything to fall apart because they're mad, and they want everyone to know that they're better. And they just celebrate the downfall of the West because the West is bad and the East is good, and they're on the Eastern side, and they'll show their neighbors, they're going to show everybody. That's considered to be the other option. Well, I reject both Do you hear me? I reject both. I am not going to be a Western chauvinist. I am not going to try and prop up a dying system of imperialism. I'm not going to deny the evil things that this government does around the world. I'm not going to deny the history of slavery and colonialism. I am not going to deny that the USA invaded Iraq and killed hundreds of thousands of innocent people. I am not going to pretend that those military bases are around the world defending my freedom and my way of life. Those military bases are defending an evil system, a financial system, a system that's destroying the United States, destroying my country. So I am not going to be a Western chauvinist, but I am also not going to be a doomer. I'm not going to sit on the sidelines and say, well, America's getting what it deserves, and I'm the smart one who learned why on the internet, and I'm just going to sit back and watch it burn. I'm not going to do that. I am not going to do that. I am here to tell you that there is a third option. There is a third option. You don't have to be a Western chauvinist, a Western supremacist, a defender of the imperialist order. And you also don't have to be a doomer and an enemy and an isolated, polarized person in your society, because the overwhelming majority of people in America who consider themselves anti-imperialist or consider themselves to be communists or even consider themselves to be anti-war are that second category. They think the West is dying, the East is rising. They think this country is evil. It was founded on evil and I hate it. And then they wonder why no one listens to them. You know, there's an election going on in this country. Joe Biden and Donald Trump are both, Kamala Harris and Donald Trump are both running for office. Now, how many people would vote for Kamala Harris if she got on television and she said, I am going to make this country poorer because it's racist and evil, and I want all of your living standards to go down? How many people would vote for her? None. How many people would vote for Donald Trump if Donald Trump got up there? I have determined that the East is going to rise and the West is no good. So we're just going to sit back and let China take over because we're an evil country that's been evil from the beginning. And, you're not supposed to do that. You're not supposed to do that. You're not supposed to colonize other people. You're not supposed to wage coups. So we just have to let America fall apart. Not my fault, folks. That's just the way it is. If Donald Trump talked that way, do you think anyone would vote for him? Of course not. Of course not. People generally vote in elections for candidates who are going to make their lives better. Kamala Harris is up there telling her followers that she will make their lives better. Well, why isn't she doing it? She's basically the president already. Donald Trump is up there saying that he is going to make their lives better. He's going to make America great again. He's going to improve the economy. In real life, people want to see their lives get better. On the internet and in doomer isolated intellectual land, they don't. But in real life, if you are interested in really changing the world and really building a movement, you need to get people to work in their own interest. People generally don't go out and support political movements that would make their life worse. People generally don't go out and try and make their own lives worse. And that if you want things to improve, if you want to build a movement to oppose imperialism, you better be convincing people in America that imperialism is against their interest, which it is. Look at what's happening. U.S. imperialism is very well intact, and we're unpaving our own roads, and our children are dying from opioids. And we've got a huge prison population, and the cost of living is insane. People can't afford housing. Conditions are getting worse, and the U.S. has got the military bases everywhere, and we're pouring billions of dollars into Ukraine. How is this in our interest? We're getting poorer as this system continues to prop itself up around the world, right? Well, my understanding with the Center for Political Innovation And the foundation of my understanding has been that you don't have to accept either of these two options. You don't have to defend the dying imperialist system, and you don't have to celebrate the downfall of your country. That we have a third option called multipolarity. America could be reborn as a country that operates differently and trades with Russia and trades with China and trades with Iran and trades with Africa in a non-predatory way. We could reinvent the United States economically so that we traded with countries around the world in a way that enabled them to become wealthier, and we continued to get wealthier ourselves. We could stop being imperialist and not just crash and burn to the ground like the PSL wants, but rather we could be reborn and become a very prosperous and wealthy country, trading with countries, rising up as they rise up. Win-win cooperation. That's the idea. That is the third option. And it is the only serious form of anti-imperialism. Any anti-imperialism that is of the variety I just described is nothing but pessimism, is nothing but isolation, is nothing but the refuge of socially isolated people wanting to make themselves feel better. It's not real politics. If you are triggered by the American flag, and you're not a black nationalist, if you're a white American and you think the American flag is racist, I don't consider myself American, just check out of politics because you're not serious. Right? Our job, if we are going to build a real anti-imperialist movement in America, is to say that America can change. America needs to restructure its economy in a way that we can trade with China, and as China gets wealthier, we get wealthier in the process. We can restructure our economy so that as Russia gets wealthier, we get wealthier in the process. We need to restructure the American economy so that we trade with countries and growth is promoted. We need to change the nature of our economy so that the successes of the rest of the world can be our successes, and so that we're not preventing other countries from rising and keeping other countries poor, and we're not also deteriorating internally. We can restructure the United States. That is the idea. All realistic, the only realistic form of anti-imperialism is this. Anyone who talks about anti-imperialism that isn't talking this way has no interest in building a real anti-imperialist movement. They just want to LARP. They just want to feel good about themselves. They just want to pat themselves on the back. They just want to feel comfortable in their isolation, but they're not serious. They're not serious. I believe America can change. I believe that the United States can be restructured economically, and we can continue to grow and expand, and we can see our living standard once again start rising, our life expectancy rise. I believe that we can have a prosperous economy once again if we change, if we have a very dramatic change in our economy. That's what we can see. And rather than condemn the country, and rather than scream against the country I live in and give it the middle finger, the Center for Political Innovation has put out 4 points, 4 economic reforms that will make life better in America. 4 steps, 4 things that would make the United States more prosperous. The first one would be a mass mobilization to rebuild the country. We hire all the young people. We hire the greatest engineers and scientists, and we put them to work building. We start paving the roads. We build high-speed railway. We build new universities. We build new hospitals, new power plants. We revamp America. We hire millions of young people. We put them to work in a national plan to rebuild this country. Something like what Roosevelt did with the Works Progress Administration, something like what Stalin did with the 5-year economic plans, something like what Khomeini did with his construction jihad in Iran. We have a national mobilization to rebuild America. We mobilize the youth to go out and build. That's step one. Step two, how do we pay for it? We put our natural resources, the natural wealth of this country, the oil, the natural gas, the coal, the timber, we put it under public ownership. So the profits from our natural resources go into a public budget. You take the burden of taxation off the population. People pay too much money in taxes. The taxes, I live in New York. The taxes here are insane. It's like a third of my paycheck is taxes here. This is nuts, right? It's nuts when we're sitting on a gold mine. The natural gas under our feet, the oil in Louisiana, the oil in Texas. There's loads of natural resources in this country that make billions and billions of dollars for rich Wall Street people that are invested all over the world and have no loyalty to the country. Put our natural resources under public ownership. So the profit from our energy and our natural resources goes into the public budget, and we can use that money to rebuild the country. That's step number two. Step number three is we create a national bank. And we create state banks and local banks, but lending of money is in the public interest. We cancel the debt. We have a debt jubilee. We cancel the debt, and we create a number of public banks that lend money in accordance with an economic plan. We decide that we want to build more prosperous cities in the Midwest. We loan money to people to start businesses in the Midwest. We loan money to people to buy new houses in the Midwest. We strategically lend money as part of an economic central plan. We have a vision for how the country can become wealthier, and money gets lended to people. Credit is assigned based according to that economic vision. We create the centralization of credit, and we lend money in order to rebuild the country economically. And the fourth point is that we then enact an economic Bill of Rights: the right to a job, the right to housing, the right to education, the right to health care. And we don't do these things because we're just giving it to people as a handout. We do it as an investment in the country. We view every child that is born and every able-bodied person in the United States, we view them as an asset because they have labor power. And it is human labor and human creativity and human productivity and human labor that is the source of all wealth. And so if we're going to have a strong, productive economy, we need a lot of strong, productive workers. That means they have to be healthy. So they have to get health care, and they have to be able to see a doctor when they're sick, and they need medical care that focuses on prevention. They need healthy food to eat. So we need to have health care for everybody so that we have a country of able-bodied, strong, fit people who can go out and do great things and build and produce more wealth. And on top of that, they need to be smart. We can't have a nation of dumb people. We need a nation full of engineers and scientists and doctors and high-tech innovators, people in the tech sector who invent new things. So we need an educated population. We're not just giving people an education. We're investing in them. We're going to have a strong country. We need a lot of educated people. And on top of that, if we're going to have a strong country, we need the labor power of everyone. We can't just let a bunch of people just sit around and collect a welfare check. Everyone should have a job, full employment. All right, full employment should be created. We have laws already on the books that say the government must work to create full employment, and we should have full employment. And every able-bodied person should be put to work doing a job that is useful for the country. If a private company can't hire them, we hire them to start building new roads and new highways, and we eradicate unemployment as we build a new productive economy. Now, those 4 steps that I listed, they would dramatically restructure the United States because they would break the power of the big banks. In order to put the banking system under public ownership, you'd have to defeat Goldman Sachs. You'd have to defeat the Rockefellers and the Carnegies and the DuPonts. You'd have to defeat Wall Street. The same for the natural resources. To put oil and gas under public ownership, you'd have to defeat the power of Bank of America. You'd have to defeat the power of ExxonMobil and Shell and Chevron and all these oil giants, right? The ultra rich would basically have their power broken. And a government that was based in a mass popular movement that saw its job as ensuring economic growth and development, as rebooting America economically, paving those roads, building those high-speed railways, educating people, providing services to people, a government that's job was to oversee economic growth would emerge. Right? So those 4 points would reinvent the United States economically. Now, that in and of itself would not be socialism necessarily in the Marxist sense. You'd still have a lot of private companies, but it would be such a powerful blow. The ultra monopolies and the imperialists, the oil bankers would be defeated. And there would be such a mass popular movement that would have to be created, and such a popular state, a government that was actually serving people, would emerge out of that at that point, socialism, or whatever you want to call it, wouldn't be that far off. But it wouldn't be Bernie Sanders socialism, right? It wouldn't be giving everyone a bunch of free stuff, taxing people to give people a bunch of free stuff. It wouldn't be Norway and Sweden. No, it would be a remolding of the economy so that we had a government that actually served the people. And the slogan we use for this is, we need a government of action to fight for working families. We need a government of action that will fight for working families, right? A government that doesn't just sit back and let the country fall apart, but a government of action that fights for working people. And the only way such a government could come into existence is if many people got involved in the political process and a broad coalition was formed. And ultimately, it would be in the interest of everyone in this country. It would be in the interest of factory workers. It would be in the interest of farmers. It would be in the interest of black people, white people, Asian people, Arab people. It would be in the interest of the overwhelming majority. Most of the rich people in America would benefit from this. It is only the ultra rich, only those big monopolies that are spread all over the planet, for whom our military is being sent all over the world to protect. It is only the ultra rich, the monopolists, the imperialists who would lose out. And it would be America as a country that would win out. But the rest of the world would win out too, because no more would we have an economy that's dominated by people who benefit from tearing the rest of the world down. And in fact, if the USA was economically reinvented in this manner, it would be in our interest to trade with China. It would be in our interest to hire Chinese corporations to help us design those high-speed railways. Nobody makes high-speed railways better than the Chinese do. It would be in the interest of us to get along with Russia. Russia, their oil and gas, they've got that down to a science. They're very, very good at it, and their mining is very, very good. And as we set up a centralized system of public control of our natural resources, we'd be hiring engineers from Gazprom and Rosneft. We'd have partnerships with them, and with their mining corporations, their titanium corporations, we'd be teaming up with them to do it, right? And our engineers and scientists would team up with engineers and scientists in China. We'd be inventing new artificial intelligence and new science and new developments. Fusion energy, which is the way out of the fossil fuel nightmare, would speed forward. It would be a whole different thing. The rest of the world would get wealthy, and we would get wealthy in the process. And the U.S. economy would no longer be an imperialist economy, and the world could continue to zoom ahead beyond imperialism. And that is what we are for at the Center for Political Innovation. And that's why the bulk of the so-called left and the so-called communists hate us, because they want to tear it down. They want to burn it down. They became communists to show everyone that no one can tell them what to do. They became communists because the American government says communism is bad, and so they're becoming that because they want to show everyone. And that's not interested in that. Really not interested in that. Maybe I was when I was 15. Maybe I was when I was 25, but I'm not interested in that anymore. I'm interested in changing the world. And I love my country. I love my country. I want life to get better in America. And I believe that this system that engages in these wars all around the world, that is pushing us to the brink of World War III with Russia, is not to the benefit of America. I'm pretty adamant about that. And I don't think it is strategic for us to just sit on the sidelines and condemn, right? That's what PSL thinks, right? Brian Becker can make lots of money staging Palestine rallies that offend and give the middle finger to middle Americans. And that's what he does. And he makes lots of money. He lives a very comfortable lifestyle, protest hustling, alienating the American people, and making sure that the Palestine movement stays 100 miles away from the American working class, right? And then on top of that, you got Danny Haiphong, who just sits on his computer condemning America. America's an evil country, blah, 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 blah. I hate the American flag. You got Ben Norton on there. Anyone who's against abortion, when he's living in Nicaragua, which has the strictest anti-abortion laws of any country in the world, Ben Norton gets on there. Oh, anyone who's against abortion is a theocratic fascist who needs to be thrown in jail. You're living in Nicaragua, Ben, but they just natter away condemning and making, and people who are already alienated and already angry listen to them and feel pumped up in their anger, and nothing is accomplished. Well, I don't think my job is to accomplish nothing. My job is to actually build a real anti-imperialist movement and try to save my country and try to get my country to stop engaging in these wars around the world and try to point to a new way forward where Russia is not our enemy, China is not our enemy, but Wall Street, our real enemy. The ultra monopolies that are impoverishing the world are actually defeated, not where I just get to yell at them on my computer and feel good, but where they're actually defeated and we actually see our country rejuvenated and restructured in a way that is not antagonizing the rest of the world and is also not impoverishing ourselves, right? I would actually like to play an important role in history and change the world. That's what I would like to do. And so that brings me to a number of important points. Folks, there's a reason this election coming up is so important. And if you haven't heard me say it before, I will tell you why it's so important. It's so important because Donald Trump has been asked over and over again, do you want Ukraine to win in the war against Russia? And he has said, I don't care about winning. I just want the killing to stop. And he will not say he wants Ukraine to win in this war. And many Republicans and many of Trump's biggest supporters have voted in Congress to stop the billions of dollars in aid going to Ukraine. Meanwhile, Donald Trump continues to brag about the fact that he went to North Korea, that he's the first sitting American president to ever visit North Korea. And he continues to brag about this and talk about what a great thing it is that he went to North Korea. And Kamala Harris has attacked him for doing that. And he still continues to brag about it. He doesn't care. Donald Trump continues to brag about being the first American president ever to do this. He brags about it. And the Wall Street Journal, a Republican-aligned newspaper, attacked Trump for bragging about it. And he did not stop. And he said, no, I am going to do this. I am proud. And he continues to brag about meeting with Kim Jong-un and trying to continue the peace process. Donald Trump continues to brag about it. This election is important because a Ukrainiac, someone who's obsessed with continuing this ugly war in Ukraine and killing Russians and spending, is obsessed with us spending billions of our tax dollars on this ugly war, a Ukrainiac tried to kill Donald Trump. An anti anti-Russian extremist, a convicted criminal who's also just happens to be someone who worked, it looks like, with the U.S. intelligence community to fight against Russia. A Ukrainian tried to kill Donald Trump at his golf course last Sunday, a week ago. This election is really, really important because it looks like there is a very clear difference between the two candidates. That's not saying that Donald Trump won't, be awful when he takes office and do awful things like he did last time. It's saying that on the ballot, the American people are being presented with one candidate who thinks that it was very, very awful that Trump met with Kim. Let me just put it this way. Hold on. On the ballot in November, there is one candidate who thinks this was awful. And there's another candidate who can't stop bragging about it, even when his own supporters tell him not to. And the American people are going to have the option of going to vote for a guy who thinks this was amazing and a woman who thinks this was an abomination and a crime. That's what's on the ballot this time. And the American people are going to have the option of voting for one candidate who says he doesn't care who wins in Ukraine. He just wants the killing to stop. And another candidate who says she's fully committed to sending billions and billions of dollars. And again, that doesn't mean that Trump won't do everything awful. And they agree with each other. They have exactly identical positions on Israel. Trump is trying to present Kamala Harris as if she's pro-Palestinian, which she is not. Right? And Kamala Harris is pledging allegiance to Israel. Their politics on Israel, Palestine are identical. Kamala Harris is married to a pro-Israel activist. But regardless of the fact that they're both pro-Israel, regardless of the fact that there are many other issues going back and forth between them, one candidate is presenting himself as anti-war and in favor of negotiation and in favor of de-escalating and ending the war in Ukraine, in favor of negotiating with North Korea. And the other candidate is presenting herself as opposed in principle to ever stopping the flow of weapons to Ukraine and ever meeting with North Korea. That's what's on the ballot, right? And, it's not to say that Donald Trump couldn't win and completely reverse himself. 1964, Lyndon Johnson ran as the peace candidate. And he said, you have to vote for me, not for Barry Goldwater, because Barry Goldwater will escalate the Vietnam War. And he won, and Lyndon Johnson won, and he escalated the Vietnam War. And Woodrow Wilson, he ran for president. His slogan was, he kept us out of war. And once he got into office, he got America into World War I. So there's no guarantee that Donald Trump won't take office and reverse himself. He very well could do that. Zelensky did that. You'll remember Zelensky was the peace candidate in Ukraine. He said that he was going to implement the Minsk agreements and he was going to sign a peace treaty with Russia and he was going to de-escalate with Russia. But look what Zelensky did. And so it's very possible that nothing could change. But just the fact that the American people would go out and vote for Donald Trump, under these circumstances, there is a clear difference in what the two candidates are advocating, a very, very, very clear difference in foreign policy. And one of the candidates is championing everything wrong with foreign policy. And the other candidate, at least in words, is mouthing opposition to U.S. foreign policy in two key areas. And there is a clear difference in this upcoming election. And I hope that Donald Trump wins. Even though I don't agree with Donald Trump about Israel and Palestine or a lot of his domestic policies. But there's a bigger division. And this is what I have been trying to get people to understand. And this is what I wrote an entire book about. A couple years ago, I wrote this book, Where is America Going? Marxism, MAGA, and the Coming Revolution. It's not just about Trump. It's not just about Trump versus Kamala. It's about two layers of the American economy. Kamala Harris, she always talks about she grew up poor. She didn't grow up poor, but she's not ultra rich either, right? Her father is a professor from Jamaica. Her mother was a cancer researcher from India. Wealthy family from India, wealthy family from Jamaica. But Kamala Harris has been groomed by the richest of the rich. And in my book, I talked about how it was all of Hillary Clinton's donors, and she's been picked by the richest of the rich. She is a functionary of the U.S. foreign policy establishment, the Council on Foreign Relations, the World Economic Forum, the Asia Society, the CIA, the National Endowment for Democracy, the U.S. regime change, color revolution apparatus. That's who picked Kamala Harris. Whereas Donald Trump is a very, very wealthy man who owns a lot of real estate. He's a real estate tycoon. His dad was a wealthy real estate tycoon in New York City. And Donald Trump is a wealthy real estate tycoon who also became a media figure, eventually was on public reality TV or whatever. Donald Trump is, and that Donald Trump's administration was full of lower level capitalists. If you look at Donald Trump was supported by lots of millionaires and billionaires who are not part of the club. Betsy DeVos, she's a billionaire and she was Trump's Secretary of Education. But what is her source of money? She's the queen of Amway, Tupperware parties, right? And her brother is Eric Prince of Blackwater. And who else is a big supporter of Donald Trump? MyPillow, Mike Lindell. Well, Mike Lindell's a millionaire, right? Wealthy guy, designed a pillow, but is he running American capitalism? You think he's the ultra top dog running Wall Street? Of course not. He runs MyPillow. He's a millionaire from his pillow company. And who else was in who's a big supporter of Donald Trump? Hobby Lobby. Now, do you think Hobby Lobby is running the American economy? Do you think Hobby Lobby those are the people that have the power? Of course not. But the CEO of Walmart, the Walton family from Walmart, the Walmart CEO, they joined the Stop Trump movement at their shareholders convention. They gave the fist and they denounced Donald Trump. General Electric, Boeing, Bank of America, all of them were waving the Black Lives Matter flag, waving the rainbow flag, and calling for Trump's ouster. The ultra monopolies that really have the power hate Trump. And the people who like Trump are lower level capitalists who see the U.S. economy going down the tubes and they want to make more money. And it's the lower levels of capital, the lower levels of the rich people that are getting squeezed by the ultra monopolies and their degrowth policies and their global system that is leaving America behind and unpaving the roads. And, people can't get to Hobby Lobby if the roads aren't paved in their neighborhood, and people can't spend money at Hobby Lobby if they're too busy trying to bail their relatives out of jail or get their relatives into rehab for fentanyl. And, people can't spend money at Amway Tupperware parties if they've been laid off from their jobs. And, if there's no good paying jobs and they can barely afford their mortgage, and that the domestic economy of the United States is being actively degrown. The infrastructure is falling apart. Inflation is squeezing everybody. People can't afford to survive. The domestic economy of the USA is being smashed. Meanwhile, the ultra-monopolistic corporations are trying to secure their grip by creating an all-out war, and they're trying to crack down on dissent by setting up a police state, by imprisoning people who disagree with them and challenge them. And so there's a lot of capitalists that have lined up behind Donald Trump for their own economic reasons. They feel like they're being crushed. Now, what they are going to realize is what all capitalists eventually realize in times like these. This is called Bonapartism. When a long-term capitalist crisis begins, the capitalists begin recruiting working class people to be their foot soldiers, and they begin fighting with one another and suppressing each other because they want the state to be used to liquidate the crisis. They want the government to step in and stabilize things. But in order to do that, they have to defeat other capitalists. And the lower levels of capital, aligned with Donald Trump, are already figuring out that if they're going to be able to push back against the ultra monopolies, they're going to need working class people on their side. That's why Donald Trump supported the UAW strike. That's why the Teamsters Union was invited to speak at the Republican convention. The head of the Teamsters spoke at the Republican convention. Is the lower levels of capital are going to realize that in order to push back against the ultra monopolies, their only hope is to mobilize the working class. And this is going to be the very beginning of what William Z. Foster spoke of, the great American communist leader spoke of, the anti-monopoly coalition. A coalition against the big monopolies and their drive toward war and their austerity and their low-wage police state. An anti-monopoly coalition is going to emerge. And what Donald Trump represents is he is a Bonapartist figure who represents the very beginning of an anti-monopoly coalition. And what the folks at Hobby Lobby and what Sheldon Adelson and Betsy DeVos and Mike Lindell are going to realize is that not only do they need the support of the American working class, but they would make a lot more money if we were friends with China, if we were friends with Russia, if we were friends with Iran. And pretty soon, those lower level capitalists are going to realize it's not enough to have a government that just sits back, right? They don't like that the liberals and the big monopolies are using the government to impoverish them. So they say government hands off. But pretty soon, they're going to realize the only option they have is a government that punches up. A government that mobilizes the working class and punches up and breaks the power of Jeff Bezos and breaks the power of ExxonMobil and breaks the power of Bank of America, and a government that punches up to rebuild the economy. That libertarian policies are not going to cut it. You need a government of action that will fight for working families. You need a government that punches up and breaks the power of the big monopolies and paves those roads and hires the unemployed. A government that takes control of the oil, takes the oil from ExxonMobil and uses those profits to rebuild the American economy. You need a government that takes control of the banks and says we're going to lend money in the interest of that domestic economy so the American economy can get wealthier. That is what is ultimately going to happen. And it's going to be hard for them to learn that because that goes against everything they've been taught to believe. They think that Jeff Bezos is a communist. They think the ultra rich are communists, and they think any government involvement is against the American way. But they're going to learn the hard way that those who believe in economic growth, the working class that wants a better life for its kids, working families, the middle class that wants to start their small businesses and have a more prosperous economy, and yes, even many wealthy capitalists who will still believe in economic growth and resent the power of the ultra monopolies are going to have to form an anti-imperialist bloc, an anti-monopoly coalition, and this is the future of the United States, an anti-monopoly coalition. That's the future of the United States. But you don't just declare these things. How does this actually happen? How do we actually get this? I'll tell you, right after Donald Trump wins, we need to start talking about this. We need to start talking about this. And I'll tell you why. I'm going to get a bigger map. I'm going to have to get a bigger map. Hold on. I'm finding a bigger map to show you because it's not, you need to get a bigger view. Hold on. All right. This is the United States and the Pacific Ocean and Asia. Now, I'll use my pointer here. In this part of the world, And this part of the world and this part of the world, a huge explosion of economic growth is happening right now. Right? In this part of the world, there's all kinds of farming going on because of global warming. Used to be you couldn't grow many crops in this area because it was too cold. But thanks to global warming, they're having a farming boom in Russia right now. Russia is having some of the biggest harvests in the world. This is what they call the Far East of Russia. And in the Far East, there is an economic boom happening. There's farms, there's mining, there's every year they have the Vladivostok Economic Forum in Russia to celebrate and to kind of showcase all the economic development that's happening here. Huge amount of economic growth happening in the Russian Far East. And go over to Mongolia. Huge amount of economic growth is happening there. The Russians are on one side, the Chinese are on the other, and huge amount of economic growth is happening there. And in China, huge amount of poverty alleviation. There's all kinds of people in this part of the world that have never had running water, never had electricity, that are getting it, that have never had universities, that are going to university. I mean, there's just an explosion of economic growth happening in this part of the world. And we're right here. This is America. And all of that economic growth is that close to us. Do you see that tiny area? That's how close we are to benefiting from all of that. This would be like if there was a millionaire or a billionaire who moved into the house next door to you. There's an explosion of economic wealth and growth happening right over here. And we're that close to it. And meanwhile, over here in the United States, everything is getting poorer and poorer and poorer. Now, they're pretty wealthy in Southern California with Hollywood and all of that. They're pretty wealthy in New York City, but the bulk of this area is getting poorer and poorer and poorer. And the bulk of Alaska is doesn't have electrification. I mean, this is a very, very impoverished state. I mean, in terms of industrialization, people don't have running water in their homes, etc. And this country is getting poorer. And so there's all this growth happening over here. Alaska is underdeveloped, and the United States they're unpaving the roads. If we were to build that bridge, suddenly some of that wealth from over there could start trickling over here. It's common sense. It's just common sense. If there's a huge amount of economic growth happening over here, why not build a bridge so that some of that wealth can come over here? Some of the new corporations that are opening up might want to sell products, and they could ship them over that bridge. And some of the new corporations over here, they might want to buy some American products, so they could get on the bridge and go over here and buy those products and then bring them back. And it's just common sense from an economic perspective that we would build this bridge. But this bridge, it just seems like common sense. And it just seems like what you would do if you have two countries that are this close to each other. There just needs to be a bridge, right? There's the English Channel, right? The tunnel under the English Channel connecting England to France, right? You've got the Suez Canal so that people can go into the Mediterranean and they don't have to go around Africa. I mean, it just seems like common sense. So you'd put a bridge here. And building this bridge would be good for Hobby Lobby because people could come over the bridge and shop at Hobby Lobby. And it would be good for Amway and Tupperware because people could go over this bridge and buy Amway products and then take them back to Russia and have that. It'd be good for My Pillow because they could ship My Pillows over the bridge and people in Russia could buy My Pillows and sleep comfortably at night. It would be good for It would be good for Sheldon Adelson, right? Because he owns a lot of casinos in Vegas, and people could come over the bridge and go down here and gamble in his casinos in Nevada. And I mean, it would be good for everybody, except for the ultra monopolies. The ultra monopolies don't want any connection with Russia because they want to dominate the oil markets. And the way Russia has rebuilt its economy, it's selling oil and gas in competition with them. It would be bad for Bank of America. And it would be bad for the ultra monopolies because they want this to just be a giant black hole. Right? And that's what they've done in North Korea. They've made it a giant black hole. It would be bad for the ultra monopolies. It would be good for the bulk of the American economy. It'd be good for the Russian economy, good for the Chinese economy, the Korean economy, good for everybody. But it would be bad for the ultra monopolies that want to dominate the world. I think Donald Trump could very, very, very easily be persuaded to build the bridge. I think Donald Trump could very easily be persuaded to build the bridge just because he would want to spite Kamala Harris. He'd want to spite the people who hate Trump, are calling him an agent of Russia. They hate Russia. He would do it just to spite them. Oh, you know, they get mad that I want to bid along with Russia. I'm not just going to get along with Russia. I'm going to build a bridge to Russia. Take that, you fool. He would do it just out of spite, just to stick it to Joe, just to stick it to Kamala, just to stick it to Hillary. Donald Trump would build that bridge. I'm convinced he would build it purely out of spite, and that's fine. I don't care why he builds the bridge. Right? I think Donald Trump would very easily build this bridge because it's something he can be remembered by. They can put his name on it. They can take photographs of him dedicating it. I think Donald Trump will build this bridge. I think he could very easily be persuaded just because it would be a historic bridge. It would be a historic bridge, and he would always be remembered for it. Donald Trump, he wanted to be remembered. That's why he did the picture with Kim. Right? As he wanted to be remembered as the president who met with Kim. He did this because he wanted to go down in history, and he knew that his opponents wouldn't like it. I think he would very easily do this for the exact same reasons. However, this bridge could change the course of history because right now the U.S. economy is centered around trading across the Atlantic. Right now, our economy is centered around trading with Europe, the NATO countries. What this bridge would do, I just want to put it back on the screen. What building a bridge across the Bering Strait would do is that it would pivot the entire U.S. economy eastward. Suddenly, there would be a way that we could trade east rather than simply trading west. And as this economy grows stronger and stronger and stronger, we could pivot as a country toward trading with it. And that would then give the upper hand to the lower levels of capital. And that would push forward the process of defeating the big monopolies. It would be a huge game. It could shift the United States. It could nudge the United States in the direction of joining with this economy and not trying to crush it. It could actually change things for the better. I'm telling you that building this bridge could begin the process. Now, obviously, they've been talking about building such a bridge for a long time. It comes from Abraham Lincoln originally. Abraham Lincoln was the president of the United States during the American Civil War. He was killed shortly afterwards, but his economic advisor was an anti-slavery activist named Henry Charles Carey. This was Abraham Lincoln's economic advisor, Henry Charles Carey. And Henry Charles Carey was an economist who distinguished very strongly between, I'll put his image on the screen here, hold on, between what he called the American system and the English system. And he wrote a book called A Harmony of Interests. And he pushed Abraham Lincoln to build railroads all over the United States. And in 1874, after Lincoln had been assassinated, Henry Charles Carey had a convention with many different proposals for building railroads. And one of them was a railroad connecting Alaska to Russia. And Henry Charles Carey, Abraham Lincoln's economic advisor, was the first one to propose building a bridge across the Bering Strait. And he wasn't the only one. Many people have thought of it. But the reason that Henry Charles Carey promoted this is Henry Charles Carey was very opposed to slavery, and he viewed slavery as the English British Empire system that opposed economic development. And if you read his pamphlet, Harmony of Interests, that's the big point he makes, is that slavery was preventing the United States from industrializing, and it was supplying the British textile mills with cheap cotton. And the Confederates, in their Constitution, outlawed looms because they didn't believe in technological development. They wanted to keep an underdeveloped agrarian slave economy with the barbaric practice of slavery, and that they were opposed to industrialization. They were opposed to development because they wanted the British Empire to stay at the center of the world. And Henry Charles Carey believed in what he called, advancement and bettering mankind. He believed in economic development. And so he believed that the state should build railroads, and the state should build lighthouses, and the government should build bridges, and the government should build all kinds of things, right? And the state should be overseeing the industrialization. He was tied in with a German economist named Friedrich List, and he was tied in with a number of different people who believed in industrialization. Karl Marx also admired Henry Charles Carey. He said he was the only economist in America of any worth, and that his pamphlet, Harmony of Interests, opposing slavery, was the best anti-slavery pamphlet Karl Marx had ever read. And Henry Charles Carey, he proposed building this bridge. And I'm telling you all, I think Donald Trump is going to win this election. I don't think there's any way they can give Kamala Harris the election. I mean, never say never, right? But at the same time, I think Kamala Harris did so badly. Look, on my last stream, I played her debate, her Oprah thing. I made this short video, and forgive me if you've already seen it, but I instead of showing my comments on the screen, I just put little comments below. This was Kamala Harris's latest town hall with Oprah.
Us on Zoom from Pennsylvania.
Hi, Oprah. Hi, Madam Vice President. It's nice to be with you all.
Yes.
Hi.
And so, what did you want to say to the Vice President?
So, Madam Vice President, we are, like many, many young Americans, just experiencing a very high cost of living. We ended up giving up our apartment, moving in with our parents, who were so gracious to take us in for over a year so that we could save money and ultimately buy a home, because that's what we thought the American dream was, to get married and buy a home and have a baby. And now here we are, and our mortgage is incredibly higher than what we thought it would be. And we really would love to know what your plan is to help lower the cost of living.
Yeah, first of all, thank you both for being here. And yours is a story I hear around the country as I travel. And in terms of both rightly having the right to have aspirations and dreams and ambitions for your family, and working hard and finding that the American dream is, for this generation and so many recently, far more elusive than it's been. And we need to deal with that. And there are a number of ways. One is bringing down the cost of everyday necessities, including groceries.
What is on your heart to say to the American people as we have 47 days until November 5th?
We love our country. I love our country. I know we all do. That's why everybody's here right now. We love our country. We take pride in the privilege of being American. And this is a moment where we can and must come together as Americans, understanding we have so much more in common than what separates us. Let's come together with the character that we are so proud of about who we are, which is we are an optimistic people. We are an optimistic people. Americans, by character, are people who have dreams and ambitions and aspirations. We believe in what is possible. We believe in what can be. And we believe in fighting for that. That's how we came into being, because the people before us understood that one of the greatest expressions for the love of our country, one of the greatest expressions of patriotism, is to fight for the ideals of who we are, which includes freedom to make decisions about your own body, freedom to be safe from gun violence, freedom to have access to the ballot box, freedom to be who you are and just be, to love who you love openly and with pride, freedom to just be. And that's who we are. We believe in all that. And so this is a moment where we stand knowing what we are fighting for. We're not fighting against. It's what we're fighting for.
Thank you. Thank you. Madam Vice.
Yeah. I mean, there's no way this is going to win the election. She's incompetent. I mean, she's proving herself to be incompetent. There's got to be a lot of people among the ultra rich who are just saying, okay, we know how to push Trump's buttons. We know how to manipulate Trump. But this is just like, I mean, how is this allowed to happen? Right? I mean, Barack Obama was a lot like her in terms of policy, but he was charismatic. Hillary Clinton is better than that. I mean, that was just sad. I mean, and that's, I mean, there's a lot of people watching this going, oh yeah, she's not going to win. Like, this is ridiculous. And she's not going to win. She's not going to win. People are not going to turn out in big numbers to vote for her. The Muslim community is not going to vote for her in Michigan and in Illinois and in Minnesota and Wisconsin. And yeah, I am predicting a landslide for Trump. I am predicting that Trump will win in a blowout. These polls that are saying otherwise are malarkey. I think it was said on the Jimmy Dore show by one of their guests, they said there may be a lot of people who lie and say they voted for her and actually vote for Trump because they want to fit in. And I think that's probably true, especially among like more middle-class people. There's probably a lot of people who will be not respectable in their office, not respectable in their law firm to say they voted for Trump, but they will. Because they want the economy to get better and they see her as incompetent. And I don't think she's going to win. I really don't. And that Donald Trump has been going on, while she can barely give an interview, she can barely handle a scripted interview like that one. Donald Trump has gone on every podcast, every interview. He looks like the most humanizing, friendly person. Donald Trump is just, is coming across as the most humanizing, friendly, lovable guy right now. And Kamala is every time she opens her mouth, people like her less and less and less. So I think Donald Trump is going to win. When he wins, we need to make clear that it's a mandate to finish what Trump started, peaceful reunification of the Korean Peninsula. That's the first thing we got to make sure, right? And on top of that, I think we got to push to build the World Land Bridge, right? I think we got to pivot the United States eastward, because that will boost the lower levels of capital. That'll pivot us into the new economy, and that'll lay the basis for restructuring the U.S. economy to be one based on growth. It'll be pushing forward our vision of building a stronger United States. And I think that's what needs to happen. And I guess I want to say a couple more things while I'm here. A couple more things I want to say, right? And I want to say these things because they need to be said, right? Because I am interested in actually changing the world. And I've come a long way, right? For me, being an activist is a journey of self-improvement. I tell people one of the best things that ever happened to me, I thank God every day for this, is when I was 15 years old, I was shy, I was socially awkward, and I was also being constantly told by my family to stop talking about politics. They thought my political ideas were so off the wall and so crazy. How can you be a communist? How can you be all these things? That my parents were constantly telling you, don't talk about politics at school. Don't talk about politics with people. But I went to a communist bookstore. My mom dropped me off at the communist bookstore. She and my brother were up in the city for something else. And my mom said, don't leave the store, whatever you do. I went into the communist bookstore, and they were having a discussion about the war in Iraq or whatever. And then after the discussion ended, they said, all right, we're going to go sell the newspaper. And they shoved a stack of newspapers, communist newspapers, into my hand. And I was like, wait, what? And they explained, oh, yeah, we go out and sell the paper. And I was like horrified. It was terrifying. I was like, are you kidding me? You want me to walk up to people that I don't even know and try to get them to pay me actual money for a newspaper about communism? And you want me to convince them to open their wallets and pull money out and give it to me in exchange for a newspaper about communism? They said, yep, we do it all the time. Go out and sell the paper. And I was like, you got to be kidding me. This is the most awful thing. So they said, no, we do it all the time. So I went out there. I tried to sell papers, rejected by somebody. And I'll never forget the first newspaper I ever sold. I went to Orville High School, and I had a Letterman's jacket because I had played soccer my freshman year. And so I had a Letterman's jacket, an athletic Letterman's jacket, because I'd been an athlete. And it had a big O on it for Orville. And so I remember there was a man and his wife, and the guy had a ball cap on. He was a football, an athlete, football fan, something like that. And he was walking with his wife, and I went up to him and I said, yeah, you want to buy a newspaper? I was so nervous about communism or whatever. And then the man, he said, I don't agree with communism, but I can see you go to Oberlin College. I can see the O on there. You go to Oberlin. So I'll buy your paper. I like Oberlin. I like their football or whatever. And he paid me $1, and I handed him a newspaper. That was the first communist newspaper I ever sold. Crazy story, isn't it? I sold a communist newspaper for $1 when I was 15 years old. And you know what? I am so thankful for that, because I went to college eventually. And when I was in college, we sold newspapers almost every day. I was out there selling newspapers. Every Saturday, I was getting up in the morning, and when I did that, I learned to talk to people. I learned to engage with people. And I also learned the ideas. I had to study the ideas in order to be able to convince them. And I learned, and that got me out of my shell. And I actually had good numbers. I had some of the highest numbers in selling newspapers after a while. And later, I joined the Workers' World Party, and I sold their newspaper. I handed out their leaflets. And I learned to do outreach and to engage with people. And it got me out of my shell. And it taught me how to defend my ideas. And it made me proud of what I stood for. And it was the beginning of me improving as a person. And I will be honest with all of you, right? I have spent my adult life unlearning the feelings and the sentiments that attracted me to communism. right? I'll be real. When I was attracted to communism, when I was a teenager, it was based on alienation. It was based on being mad at the country I lived in. It was based on it was teenage Satanism, right? I was angry at the country I lived in. I was angry at my parents. I was angry at living in a small town. I was and I wanted to embrace something that was against everything, and I knew certain things that were true, right? I knew certain things that were true, and society wouldn't recognize them. I knew that the Soviet Union had great economic achievements, and it really made me angry to hear everyone just repeat, well, communism just failed everywhere. And I knew that wasn't true in terms of basic economic data. That was not true. Um, you know, and I've spent my whole adult life learning to see things differently and learning to understand that communists don't hate the people in the society they live in, and that imperialism and is hurting the American working class and making us poorer. And it took me a long time to deal with my own personal stuff. I had to heal. I had to find my own way. And I eventually reestablished my relationship with God. I rediscovered my Christian faith in Iran. And, I've come a long way. And it's been a journey of self-improvement, of getting better at interacting with people, improving my social skills, understanding the world better, understanding what imperialism is, understanding economics, understanding the history of mass social movements. And this has been a journey of self-improvement, a journey of improving myself, right? That's what it has been. And, that's what it is for all of us. And in fact, this is another quotation from the Little Red Book that I will put on the screen. Oh, wrong quote. Sorry. How shall we judge whether a youth is a revolutionary? How can you tell? There can only be one criteria, namely, whether or not he is willing to integrate himself with the broad masses of the workers and peasants and does so in practice. If he is willing to do so and actually does so, he is a revolutionary. Otherwise, he is a non-revolutionary or a counter-revolutionary. If today he integrates himself with the masses of workers and peasants, and then today he is a revolutionary. If tomorrow he ceases to do so or turns around to oppress the common people, he becomes a non-revolutionary and a counter-revolutionary. What is this quote saying? That to be a revolutionary means that you integrate with the broad masses of people. You go out and you talk to people and you engage with people and you answer people's questions and you learn what people think and what they believe. If you don't do that, if you just sit on your computer and complain about the world, if you just hate the society you live in, if you just want to see it all burned down because you're the good one, you're a non-revolutionary. You are a counter-revolutionary, right? It is through engaging with people. It is through doing outreach. It's through talking to people that you develop. This is how all of us develop. You develop by actually doing the work, by actually talking to people, actually having relationships, actually building and organizing events, actually getting things done in the real world. That's how you become a revolutionary. Like when I went out when I was 15 and sold that newspaper, I was becoming a revolutionary. I was engaging with people. It's by doing actual work that you become a revolutionary. And look, I will be honest with you. I'm not going to refer directly to anything, right? And I want to be patient with people because I see myself 10 years ago in the way some people are acting right now. And I see my own flaws, and I have grown, and other people can grow too. But I got to tell you, I look at some of the groups out there that are trying to own the word communism right now. They want to be the communists, right? And I see them and the way they act, and I see a gigantic male big penis contest. Okay? That's what I see. That's what I really, really see. I see a lot of young men who are trying to prove their manhood. to each other. Right? Generally, people in America who call themselves communists, they are doing one of two things. One, most of them are just woke, right? They're mad at racist, white, sexist males, and they want to, tear down U.S. society and all of that. And then there is a very small minority of people that understand to some degree what Russia and China are doing and kind of get it. But those spaces are dominated by young men who really want everyone to know how big their penis is. And it's really sad. It's really, really a sad thing, because I think most of these young men, most of them, I would say probably were, denigrated by their fathers in some way. They had a father who made fun of them, a father who bullied them. They had a father who wasn't impressed with their achievements, etc. And I mean, I see the way these people act and some of the conversations I've had with them. And, they all think they're going to be the great leader, but they don't understand that the organization just doesn't just pop up around them, right? That's one thing. Multiple of them, they are convinced that, they will proclaim themselves to be the great leader, and then the group just magically appears all around them. Doesn't work that way. Doesn't work that way. They're also convinced, that they are really, really important, and that being a communist and being, on the Politburo, or being the head of human resources, or being on the third committee is a way that they are important, and they really want everyone to know how important they are. And it's really fucking sad. It's really fucking sad to watch. Right. And I know these young men are probably acting the way they're acting because they're in a lot of pain. And I certainly acted that way because I was in a lot of pain and I was dealing with shit. And so I want to give people the chance to, learn, and the chance to heal themselves and all of that. But in the meantime, I'm just telling you, I am at the point where I feel like 10 years ago, when the communist groups were all kind of fringe and hiding, to be out there and be like, yes, we're communists and we'll tell you all about why, would have been strategic, right? It would have, and that's why 10 years ago I was advocating you do it, because it would have gotten you attention. It would have been novelty. It would have been scandal. But nowadays there's plenty of people out there talking about being communists, and they're all really, really obnoxious. And the word, young people calling themselves communists is actually quite common now. Right? When I was young and I was doing it, it was quite rare. But now it's quite common for, especially young transgendered people to call themselves communists, which makes no sense given the history of communism, but whatever. Right? I mean, there's a whole, it's very common nowadays for 15, 20-year-olds to call themselves communists. But none of them really understand what the communist governments are doing. And the communist governments have also changed a lot too. And they're not like they were in the 20th century. They're not doing the Cultural Revolution. They're not doing totally state-run economies. They have market sectors. And, communism has changed a lot also. And so there's a lot of things that are wrong. And I'm at the point where I really have no need. I have really no need to try and win over the small minority of, I don't know what you want to call them, MAGA communists or whatever. Really, I see a lot of young men that have a lot to prove, that are really, really desperate for people to see, to respect their masculinity. They're trying to prove something to their fathers. And it's really, I hope they get better. I hope they learn, but it's not I can't help them. I can't deal with that. And that brings me to another thing, which is what none of them understand. All right. This is what none of them understand this, right? And you don't have to be religious to understand this. I think there's a lot of people who weren't religious. I mean, Stalin pretty clearly understood this, and he was an atheist. I mean, some Russians believe he was a Christian, but according to the popular historical understanding, Stalin was an atheist, but he understood this. But this is some very old wisdom. This is from the Bible. Mark chapter 10:44. Whosoever wants to be first must be the slave of all. For even the Son of Man did not come to be served, but to serve, and to give his life as a ransom for many. Whoever wants to be first must be the slave of all. If you want to be a leader of an organization, you need to serve the people in that organization and empower them and find their skills and help them do things, right? I mean, Stalin is a great example, right? Stalin is a great example of this. The way that Stalin became very, very powerful as the leader of the Bolsheviks was that he was constantly finding people's strengths. Stalin was very, very good at finding what other people were good at and empowering them to do it and pushing them to do it and encouraging them to do it. What did Stalin spend, almost his entire life doing during the 1930s? Going around giving people rewards. The Stakhanovich movement. He was going around, oh, this person worked really, really hard. Here's an award and here's a cash bonus for them. This person visiting factories, awarding other people. Right? And the history of the Bolshevik Party, Stalin was the guy who was always finding other skilled people and putting them to work. And they all were very loyal and impressed with Stalin because he was finding what they were good at and empowering them. Sam Marcy was not a Stalin supporter, came out of the Trotskyist movement. He gave a series of lectures towards the end of his life about the Stalin-Trotsky debate, where he admitted some of Trotsky's flaws and he praised some of the good things that Stalin had, some of the leadership skills. And Sam Marcy pointed out that Stalin was very, very good at finding people's skills and helping them discover their skills and pushing them to do what they were good at and encouraging people to achieve, other people to achieve. Real leaders are not great because of what they do. Real leaders are great because of what they help other people to do, what they push other people to do, what they enable other people to discover that they are capable of doing. Right? When you go to an anti-imperialist country and they talk about Fidel Castro, or they talk about Khomeini, or they talk about Kim Il-sung, they don't talk about, oh, he was great because he moved mountains. They talk about he was great because he encouraged us to do things we weren't capable of doing. Good point. Leaders recognize and appreciate talent, but it's more than that. Leaders find talent in other people. They find what other people are good at and they advance it. And that's what real leadership is. And people don't realize that. If anyone else is good at anything, it's a threat to them, right? If somebody else is good at something, why that's embarrassing to them. That's showing them up. This is how these people think. It's sad and it's pathetic, and they're never going to lead anything real. I'm just telling you that, right? They're never going to lead anything real with that attitude. Right? They're sitting there. Oh, I'm the great important leader of the whatever. No, shut up. No, you're not. Right? Oh, I want, and I just see these young men that are all trying to prove something to their fathers. These young men that are all trying to show everyone their masculinity. And all, gloating on how important they are, giving themselves titles before they build a group. I mean, it's just a joke. Right. And it's sad, I mean, it's sad, but it is what it is. Right. And they don't want our help, and we're not going to give it to them. And on top of that, the word communist, unfortunately, I'm talking about myself, but the people that are attracted to that word are attracted to it for bad reasons. Right. And it took me my entire adult life to unlearn the feelings and the resentment and the alienation that originally attracted me to that word, and to understand that communist governments around the world aren't doing that. Communists in China are the most upstanding citizens. They're the highest achieving people, the people who go out and volunteer. They're just like, to be a communist in China is one of the highest honors. It means you're one of the most beloved, respected people in your community. It doesn't mean you're somebody who's mad at the world and wants revenge, right? And that everything that we understand is completely twisted around. And we're in a period where nothing makes any sense. But we're also in a period where our country's falling apart. And more people are worried about the future of their country. Are very, very worried about the future of their country. And there's a divide in the ruling class related to that. and the imperialist system is dying, and the East is rising because it has a planned economy and it doesn't have the radical individualism of the West. And the West is in decline, and there's a divide in the ruling class. And I've written entire books about this. I understand what's going on in the world, and it's Marxism has helped me to understand it. The economics of Marxism, Lenin's theory of imperialism, the tendency of the falling rate of profit, the problem of overproduction. All of this stuff has helped me understand what's going on in the world today. And Marxism was part of that journey. And I draw heavily from the Marxist understanding. I'm not a dialectical materialist. I believe in God. I believe in willpower, the power of ideas. I believe there is spiritual power. But I do draw heavily from the Marxist economic theories, and I advocate socialism, a planned economy, an economy where the banks and the factories and the industries are organized to serve public good and not the profits of the wealthy few. And thus human creativity is unleashed on a scale that it has never been before. And I believe we have to get beyond imperialism, and that the defeat of imperialism will necessitate the development of 21st century socialism, some form of a socialist planned economy. So, in a way I've changed, in a way I haven't changed. My feelings have changed. My feelings have changed. My understanding of how to relate to other people has changed. My motivations have changed. And my understanding has deepened. But that said, those of us who are actually anti-imperialists, rather than chasing after the people that are attracted to the word communism, what we should be doing is we should be building a real anti-imperialist movement. We should be building a movement that will really help restructure the United States to not be an imperialist country and not launch World War III, and that will rebuild the United States to have an economy that is part of the new economy that's rising. We shouldn't be trying to revive imperialism and trying to convince Americans to support imperialism. We shouldn't be chanting West is the best, but we shouldn't be doomers either. We should be advocates of restructuring the United States to be part of the new emerging economy that's developing in the world. And on top of that, we should be building a real mass movement in America to save our country with a planned economy, with a new economic model that puts the needs of the people first, not the profits of a wealthy few, right? We should be advocating a government of action to fight for working families, right? That's what we're doing. We should build the movement to promote human growth and innovation. And ultimately, the only way our organization will work is if we help people to develop their own skills. The only way, I'm saying this, and this is something I've come to the realization, and this is when we're talking about restructuring our organization. Ultimately, we need every active member of CPI to have their own project, to have their own place that they are creative, their own place that they take ownership of, right? CPI can't be a fandom of people who are just in awe of somebody, right? That's what all these stupid internet things are. They're fandoms, right? They're fandoms of one individual or another. For CPI to be a real organization, ultimately what we need is every member needs to have a piece of CPI that they built themselves, and we empower them to build. We support them to build it. But every member of CPI needs to have their own kingdom, their own queendom, their own dominion, their own community, their own project, their own vision. Every member of CPI needs to have that, or this won't work, right? If we go around expecting other people to just build something to glorify me or Peter Coffin or somebody like that, it's not going to work. Right? That might make a great YouTube channel, but that's not going to build a real organization. And what we need in this country right now is a real organization. We need a real organization. And so we're going to have to become innovationists. in that we help every person to innovate. Right? We help every person who joins us and becomes part of our community to think, to innovate, to develop their own hustle, their own side hobby to make money and carry out the vision of CPI and their own outreach program, we need every person in CPI to have their own CPI linked project to help bring people into CPI, maybe raise a little bit of money, but also to find their own creativity, to have their own vision, and to change the world and develop their own skills. That's what we're going to need for this to work. And that's very ambitious. And there's a lot of people in CPI that say, Caleb, I can't do anything. I can't do anything. Well, I'm here to tell you, you can. Maybe it's not huge. Maybe it's not what you think. But I think you can. Right? If I wanted to tell you you can't, there's plenty of YouTube channels to tell you you can't. There's plenty of doctors to tell you you can't. There's plenty of mean people on the internet who can tell you you can't. But I'm here to tell you you can. And it is my job, if I am going to actually be the leader of a real movement, of a real organization, my job is to figure out how to persuade you and motivate you to do it, to do what you can to have your own success, your own vision, to discover your own creative power, to have your own project. That is my job. If this is going to be a real movement. Now, if this is just, going to be a fandom, I just get on here and talk every night. I write books, you buy them, whatever. But if this is going to be a real movement that really changes America, that really blossoms and flourishes, my job needs to be to help you to become a leader. We need to be an organization of leaders, not an organization of people who all want to sit there and go, I'm the leader and everyone's under me. No, you need to be a leader. I need to help you discover your own leadership skills. That's my job. And it might take me a while to figure out how to do this. Might not be an easy thing for me to do, but my job is to maximize your success. The more successful you are, the more of an upstanding citizen you are, the more clearly developed your ideas are, the more articulate you are, the better you are at networking with people, the better you are at building things, the better CPI is. You are the strength of CPI, right? And that we need to develop a model of organization. We need to transition to a model of organization where we are empowering people, where we are helping people discover their skills, and we become an organization that truly is a center for political innovation. We are innovationists. We need to help you to innovate because I got to tell you, the worst way of being is being a bitter person. It's the worst way to be. And I know many bitter people. I've encountered many bitter people. And they don't have dreams, and they don't have a vision. Often they have an abusive person in their life who makes fun of their visions and puts them down and tries to demotivate them. Often they're stuck in a job that is very degrading and dehumanizing, where they're not asked to be creative. They're just kind of an appendage to a machine. And they've got, they get kind of, put down if they ever have a good idea. And so their energy, they get into kind of a sad state of existence. And their only outlet is putting other people down or being jealous and resentful of people who have what they feel like they don't have, or making fun of people who have it less than them, right? Making fun of, somebody who they think isn't as good or looks bad, or, and that is the worst way to be. That is the worst way to be. You don't want to be a bitter person. Bitterness is an expression of a huge amount of inner pain. And what I see among a lot of younger people is I see the video game mindset. In a video game, there are only certain rules you can play by. There's only certain buttons you can push. You don't innovate in a video game. In a video game, there are very clear, precise rules, and you can only win by following those very clear, precise rules. And the better video game you player you are, the more you effectively follow those concise rules. You manipulate the buttons exactly as they say, and you can do that. Video games are not asking you, for the most part, to be creative. And that a lot of young people, they get, a low-wage, short-term service sector job, and they're basically a video game player. They're a button pusher at their job. They're constantly being drilled about how well they can push the buttons exactly as they say. And they don't get to be creative, and they don't get to have new ideas. And they just are pushing buttons all day. And they don't like themselves. And they get bitter. Very quickly, they get bitter. And they get jealous of people. They feel like have it better. They pick on people they view as, quote, less than them or not as good as them. They get into internet cancel culture. It goes in a very, very bad place. This demoralized place, this bitterness. When you don't access your creative power as a person, right? You don't access your creative power, and instead you just get into this bitterness, right? And you're in this downward spiral where you don't access your creative power. You're just pushing buttons, and it just gets into a downward spiral. You don't want to be that. You don't want to be that. If you want to find happiness in this life, there are two ways that you can find happiness. Maybe there's others, but I know of two. The first way that you can find happiness is to love, to have genuine friendships, to have genuine connections with other people, to love, to experience human love and human connection. And the second way to find happiness is to build, to create, to build something, to create something, to design something, to alter the world around you and make it better. Those are the two ways you can find happiness that I know of. Now, there may be other ways you can find happiness. But if you want to experience happiness, love somebody, that includes God, right? So I asked, what about faith? That would be God. That would be God. Experience love and connection and build. And if you can do either of those things, you can find happiness. And if you don't do those things, you're not going to find happiness by using drugs. You're not going to find happiness in sexual promiscuity. You might find a temporary thrill or temporary joy, but you're not going to find happiness with using drugs. You're not going to find happiness in sexual promiscuity. You're not going to find happiness in hurting someone else or tearing somebody else down. If you want to find love, or if you want to find happiness, experience love and a human connection and build something, or do both. And the Center for Political Innovation exists for you to connect with other people, to make friends, to meet other people and learn to work with other people and learn to have better relationships with people, and to build the organization, build our movement, but also develop your own project that is in line with the organization's goals. That is what we exist to do, and to work with other people in doing so and find a human connection. We exist to provide you with the two things that can bring you happiness. That is why our organization exists. And if we are going to be a functional and effective organization, we are going to have to enable people to do these things. That is how we can exist as a group. And that's what the Center for Political Innovation exists to do. And one thing that we can do is we can talk about the World Land Bridge. We can talk about the Bering Strait Bridge. That's something we can do. We can push Donald Trump to build this bridge. We can say that it needs to be built because it'll boost the U.S. economy, and that Trump should build it to spite the Russia gators that are harassing him, the Russia haters, etc. I think we should push Donald Trump to build this bridge. After he wins, we'll obviously be pushing the Korea thing and pushing that he continue to meet with North Korea. I think we should push that he build this bridge, because it seems like something that a lot of people that are anti-Russia or, that might be for, But we can push to build this bridge, and we can insert this idea into pro-Trump circles, and we can get it out there, and we can nudge the bridge into existence. And that will nudge the U.S. economy eastward, and that will pivot the United States toward the new economy, not the dying old economy, and that will continue to push for the building of an anti-monopoly coalition. And eventually we can have a government of action in the United States that fights for working families. That's what we can have. A government of action that fights for working families, defeating the power of the imperialists, defeating the power of the big monopolies. That's what we can have. We need a government of action to fight for working families. And this bridge is a step towards it. This is a real thing that we can really advocate, that real Trumpers will want to build, that it would be in the economic interests of many powerful people in America to build, but it would pivot the United States in the right direction. Be good for Australia too, David. We should advocate the construction of this bridge. All right. I think it is something, the bridge of Eurasian American friendship. I think we can build a movement for this bridge. And I think there's people in Alaska that would want this bridge. I bet there's a lot of people in Alaska that would want the money, the development that would come from this bridge. I think there's Canadians that would want this bridge. Right? There's a real basis. We could build a real movement to build this bridge in America that could have lots of support. So I say we do it. And I say we look for openings, right? We've already, done the, I'll put on the video, right? It's been a while since I've shown this video. This was us in front of the White House. I am so proud of us because it looks like we influenced the conversation, right? Donald Trump is bragging about what he did on the Korean Peninsula. Did you know this? Donald Trump, even though the Wall Street Journal has attacked Donald Trump for it, Donald Trump continues to brag about what he did. Well, I think this has to do with the fact that 2 years ago, this was us in front of the White House. How did this stop? This was a great moment. June 30th, 2019. The leader of People's Korea and the leader of the United States shook hands. They met, the first president ever to visit the Democratic People's Republic of Korea. We had Donald Trump trying to make peace with a country that is still technically at war with the United States. Donald Trump was trying to open the door to peaceful reunification of the Korean Peninsula. There would be hope to bring the troops home from South Korea. There would be hope that there could be denuclearization, that North Korea wouldn't feel threatened anymore, that there could be no more bombs and weapons, and the people of Korea could reunify. And Donald Trump going to People's Korea was sabotaged. It was sabotaged by John Bolton and the neocons, the same forces that got us into Ukraine, the same forces that are escalating and pushing buttons against China and Taiwan on the Taiwan Strait, the same forces that want World War III sabotaged the peace process on the Korean Peninsula. We're here to say, finish what Trump started. We want peaceful reunification of the Korean Peninsula. We want U.S. leaders and the leaders of People's Korea to sit down. We would like to see trade between the United States and People's Korea. We would like to see those railroads in South Korea that have been built. We'd like to see them in action and see the Korean people trading with each other. We don't want war. We don't want money wasted on international confrontations. And we also don't want a police state. Yeah, that was us in front of the White House. But did we stop at the White House? Did we say, all right, we did it at the White House, we're done? No, we did not. Right? We continued. And after we went to the White House, we also went to the United Nations. We said it at the United Nations. With Russia, peace with China, peace with Russia, peace with China. It's time to stand for peace here at the United Nations. We are marching up to the religious rally. Russia and China are not our enemy. Peace with Russia, peace with China, peace with Russia, Peace with China. Peace with Russia. 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 Peace with China.
So next up, we'd like.
Yeah. Yeah. And we went to the United Nations, and I said it at the United Nations. I called for peaceful reunification of the Korean Peninsula at the United Nations. We went to the United Nations and we did it. And then what did we do? We went to Los Angeles. We went to Los Angeles, and we had an event in Los Angeles for peaceful reunification of the Korean Peninsula.
Saw that there was a 10 or 11-year-old girl in North Korea. She went by Yumi, and she started a YouTube channel. And this YouTube channel, I learned about it from CNN, because CNN ran an article about how scandalous it was. North Korean propaganda YouTube channel started by a 10-year-old girl. And they ran this scandalous piece about it. Well, I watched the channel. One of the videos is about her favorite popsicles, the popsicles she likes to eat. There's another video of her going fishing with her grandpa. There's another video of her going to the water park that she and her friends all like to go to. And CNN was like outraged. How dare YouTube allow this channel to exist? And they eventually took her YouTube channel down. And they took the YouTube channel down, and the reason that they gave for taking it down is they said that her YouTube channel had a, quote, positive bias toward North Korea. And I'm looking at this, I'm like, what was she supposed to do? Make a YouTube video about my country sucks? You know, I mean, it's like, this is ridiculous. And then some people say to me, well, Caleb, they're trying to say that North Korea is a paradise. They're trying to say North Korea is a paradise. That's propaganda. No, they're not trying to say North Korea is a paradise. What she's saying is that if there's a war, we're people too. That's what they're saying. And she's saying it's not just a 24/7 military parade like we see in American television. Every time they show North Korea on TV, what do you see? I say countdown. They say North Korea, and then two to 3 seconds later, you see a bunch of guys marching around like this, right? We think North Korea is just a 24/7 military parade. But there's real fathers there, there's real daughters there, there's real mothers, there's brothers, there's sisters, there's children, there's families. And if there's a war, real people are going to die. And that's what her YouTube channel was trying to say, and we need messages like that on YouTube.
Yeah. And so we had an event in Los Angeles for peaceful reunification of the Korean Peninsula. It was great. I'm glad we did it. We went to the UN, we went to the White House, and we did it in Los Angeles. And you know what? We're about to do it again in New York. Looks like coming up October 17th, we're having an event to support peaceful reunification of the Korean Peninsula in New York City. And you know what? We also did it at the Libertarian Party convention, right? We were passing out pamphlets. We were passing out pamphlets about peaceful reunification of the Korean Peninsula at the Libertarian Party convention. We had our growth pamphlet we distributed everywhere, right? You can look at it. We were handing out our Do You Believe in Growth pamphlet. We handed out over 1,000 copies of Do You Believe in Growth at the Libertarian Party convention.
Small business owners that America does, and they treat their middle class.
Got the last stack of them in the car. It's been going really, really well out there. A lot of sympathy. What did you guys hear?
Really great things. I mean, people are very interested.
I thought people were really enthusiastic about this idea that growth is good, that we need to stop spending so much damn money fueling this forever war that rages all across the world.
The response to the leaflets and the pamphlets has been phenomenal. I have never talked to so many people who support Julian Assange, who want to end the wars. This is the place to be.
Yeah. Actually, that's one indication. That's one. They're pretty good. I mean, they're very interested. A lot of them like growth.
And then a lot of people that are libertarian, they see the government as a tool of the big monopolies to crush small business owners, right? And so I don't blame them for wanting to get the government off our backs, right? Unfortunately, I think that they're going to have to come to the conclusion that just kind of getting the government out is not going to cut it. They need a government that punches up, right? A government of action that will fight for working families. That's ultimately what they're going to need. And they're going to have to learn that through the course of seeing, you know, what's in store and as the crisis intensifies. But I think the road out of the crisis we're in right now is an anti-monopoly coalition.
Yeah, and look what Trump said during his speech.
I took on the military-industrial complex. I broke the stranglehold on neocons and warmongers on the Republican Party. And instead of war, I made peace in the Middle East, something nobody thought was possible, and dealt with Kim Jong-un of North Korea, where a nuclear war was guaranteed to start in a very short period of time if Hillary Clinton became president. I will have the horrible war between Russia and Ukraine settled, so we quit spending hundreds of billions of dollars to fight other people's wars, and so that we start immediately saving thousands and thousands of lives. And I am committed to restoring peace and restoring stability. And if you vote for me on day one, I will commute the sentence of Ross Ulbricht.
Yeah, that's us. Right? That's the Center for Political Innovation. Look what I mean, we are doing an important job with our growth pamphlets, with our banner about peaceful reunification of the Korean Peninsula. We're doing real shit. Right? There's a lot of people talking on YouTube, getting a lot of retweets and all that. We're actually building a real movement. I can guarantee you none of those people at the Libertarian Party convention would ever have come across a video of me on YouTube. Unless maybe they watch RT. Maybe they saw me on RT. But other than that, they never would have seen it. But we went to them, right? I guarantee you none of those people at that LA Family Church event where we're talking about peace on the Korean Peninsula, none of them would have ever listened to any pro-North Korean anything, but they listened to us because they're committed to peace on the... We are making a difference. We are building an anti-imperialist movement in America, a serious one. Not people sitting on the outside of U.S. society being angry. Not people being resentful. Right? That's not what we're doing. We're not in this to make people resentful. Look, I can tell you a lot of things, but I will end my opening remarks for tonight. We're well over 2.5 hours. That's fine, right? I'm on here to talk, and I'm glad you're listening to me. But I just want to tell you a couple stories. The first story is I remember when I was a kid, there was a friend of my family who died. And he was a Southern man, and he was an engineer. He was a family friend. And I went to his memorial at his funeral. I believe he was a Baptist. And in his Baptist church, the minister talked about him, and his friends and family got up and talked. And they talked about how this man was like a ray of light. And when he walked into the room, he made everyone happy. He told jokes. He was friendly. And at his funeral, they said they all remembered how he was a ray of light. I remember thinking, that's what I should try to be. I should try to be a ray of light. And then, when I was in the Workers' World Party, there was a founding member of the Workers' World Party, an older man in his 80s, who died. And I went to his memorial. And at his memorial, they talked about how this older man, who was Jewish, wore a Palestine baseball cap everywhere he went. A baseball cap with Palestine on it. And everywhere he went, he was giving communist newspapers to people. And every time you saw him, he would tell you about some teenager he'd just given the newspaper to. And, oh, I just sold this many paper. Oh, I just talked to this person. I got their phone number. I think they want to get involved. Or I saw somebody, who gave me a thumbs up for my Palestine baseball cap. Every time you saw him, he gave you good news. Right? And he encountered a lot of negativity. There are plenty of people in New York City who would not like that Palestine baseball cap. There's going to be plenty of people in New York City that wouldn't want the communist newspaper, but he never told you about that. He told you the positive things. Right? And his job was to give you the positive news, and and he was always very interested in younger people who were getting involved in the party. I thought about that comrade. how he was kind of like that guy, that family friend of mine who died, who had been a ray of light. I would like to be a ray of light in this world. That's what I would like to be. That's what I would seek to be. I would like to bring peace into this world. I would like to see Russia and China and the United States become friends and trade with each other. I would like to see economic development. I think growth is good, not bad. I would like to oppose pessimism. I would like to oppose degrowth. I would like to oppose jealousy and negativity and all the negativity that I see in the world today. I would like to build people up. That is what I would like to do. I would like to build people up. I would like to encourage people to think of what the world could be and how far human creativity could soar without the irrationality of the market. And I would like to show that to people by helping them discover the creative power within themselves. I want to do what was done for me. All right. If you read my letter to Bob Avakian, that's one thing I say in my letter to Bob Avakian, is I owe that guy. In a weird way, I disagree with a lot of his understanding of communism and all of that, but his people made me go out on the street and sell newspapers, and in doing so, they saved my life. Communism saved my life. A very negative and pessimistic communist group saved my life because they showed me that I could go out and sell newspapers. I could engage with people. And I want to do that for you. I want to show you what you're capable of. I want to help you achieve things. I want you to discover your own skills and your own strengths and your own potential. That's what I want to do. That's what I strive to do. That is what my aim is for you. And that's what I want to do. And I again, I think about the Christian Gospels. Right? I think about the Sermon on the Mount. Right? What is one of the lines in the Sermon on the Mount? People always talk about, you are the light of the world. Let me see if I can pull up the quotation. You are the light of the world, and a city on a hill cannot be hidden. Yeah, here we go. Right? You are the light of the world. You are the light. I won't put it on the screen. That's weird. Won't put it on the screen. I don't know why it won't put it on the screen, but you are the light of the world, and a city on a hill cannot be hidden. And we're in this to bring light to the world, bring hope to people, bring optimism to people. That's what we're here to do. And that's what I'm in this to do. And that's, we all have limited time on this planet. You never know what could happen. But with our limited time, we should try to bring as much light into the world, as much encouragement, as much happiness into the world. That's what it means to be a good person. That's what it means to be a kind person, right? As you bring light into this world. You bring light into the dark world. You give people a reason to wake up in the morning. You give people hope and companionship and friendship. That's what it really means to be a human being.